Yes.
Correct, southeast of London. She's got some things that she's going to share with us, some pictures and some different accounts. And she came back and she was a war bride. You know what a war bride is? War bride. She married somebody that was an American serviceman. Okay? Yep. They obviously fell in love way back during the war.
Yeah,
And
1944.
1944. And then she came back here, and she was just telling me that Olaf, her daughter, was in the very first class at McNary way back when, and she's had grandkids go through here. And
Yeah, three daughters, 3 grandkids, and 1 great-grandkid.
And good. So she's got some ties in McNary, obviously. So if you have some questions, do you mind if they ask you as you address?
No.
Okay. If she speaks, if you want to ask a question, go ahead and raise your hand, and we'll see if we can answer the question as she presents. So, all right, welcome and thank you.
Well,
Okay.
thank you. It's an honor to be here. Where do I
Nope,
speak?
you just need to hold that.
Oh, just hold it.
Yep. You can even put it at your side if you want to.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you. It's an honor to be asked to come here and talk about my life of those days. I came here and settled down here, and of course you get into life and you don't think quite so much about the old days or growing up, or sometimes you weren't happy and that kind of thing. But as you get older, you think of these things more. So after my husband died 20 years ago, we were married 50 years, and after he died 20 years ago, my children gave me a computer, and I decided to write a book about growing up in London during the war. Well, things have really boomed since then. As a matter of fact, I brought 4, and if you like to pass them around, you can see some old pictures that were taken by my family, like where we lived and that kind of thing. So if you have any interest in looking at them, I can pass them to you. Is there more there? In that red bag. They're in that red bag. Anyway, I was 14 when the war broke out in 1939. We had known for a long time that we were going to go to war. It was very obvious. Things started from, as you've probably learned, from the 1930s, early 1930s. We knew that there was going to be trouble, but our government tried to calm things down and say, no, if you stop this breaking into other countries, Hitler would calm down on his work, on what he was doing, there wouldn't have been a war, but he didn't want to. So we went to war, and I will always, always remember the first day of the war. The air raid siren started blowing just immediately after Neville Chamberlain had announced that we were at war. And so, of course, we thought, oh, they're at us already. But it turned out to be a false alarm. Then the King spoke to us. I can remember my mother saying that my brother and I weren't old enough to know anything about war, so that we could go in our bedrooms. We were to just get out of the way. We weren't old enough to know what this was. He was 12 and I was 14. And of course we'd been learning about it in school, and we'd been seeing the newspaper men they used to have advertisements, flyers to show what was the biggest news, so we knew it was going to happen. But anyway, the King spoke to us, and then things calmed down, and then the all clear sounded, and they told us it was a false alarm. For the next year, not much happened. We went to war on the 3rd of September, 1939. For the next year, not much happened until it got to June. Hitler went through those countries, the Low Countries, Holland and Belgium, and then he went to France, and France capitulated. And so the men all the British Expeditionary Force were forced to the coast, and they were miraculously picked up at Dunkirk. Now, a lot of the people in England thought that that was a victory because we had picked up so many men and had been able to, had to pick up a lot of our army and bring them home so we could work again towards what we wanted to do. And, but it was not a victory. It was not a victory. It was a loss because we were out of there. Immediately, the Germans moved to the coast of France, which is 22 miles from the coast of England. And they shot their guns across and they could fire against the towns along the coast. And you could hear, where I lived, you could hear the gunfire from France. It was that close. But things didn't go too bad. We took a lot of precautions right at that time. We tore out all the road signs so that if the enemy did get onto our land, they would not be able to find their way from one town to another unless they had very explicit maps, because we took out all the road signs. We stopped ringing the church bells. The church bells would only ring if they invaded our shore, but they didn't come. So then, shortly after that, they changed their modus operandi, shall we say, and they changed and they started to send fighter planes over. And the planes fought in the sky, and they had many more planes than we did, but we managed to do very well. It was very hard until they started with the bombs. And then, of course, when the bombers came, then we had a lot more trouble on the ground. With the fighters, it was, you know, you had shells. You might be riding down the street and shrapnel's following you down the street or ruining your bicycle or something like that. But the fighting with the planes was just noisy, really, really noisy, and not nearly as dangerous as when the bombers came.
So was that the Battle of Britain?
Pardon?
Was that the Battle of Britain then?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. We were joined at that time by a lot of Australians and New Zealanders who came to help us fight the war. And most of those that came from Australia and New Zealand were pilots. And there was a lot of them stationed near where I lived. And we got to talk to them and enjoy their different accent. I got to the point where I couldn't tell an American accent from an Australian one. And then they said they couldn't understand our English accent. And you know, basically, we're supposed to be all speaking English. Sometimes I wonder about it. Anyway, then when the bombs started, the bombs were mostly incendiaries to start with. And they would come down in their thousands, absolutely thousands. They settled anywhere, and if they settled near anything combustible, then you had to make sure to get it out, because in no time things would start burning. At first you could put an incendiary bomb out with water, but then they put explosives in it. And if you put water on it, then it really exploded the fire, and your shed or your side gate or whatever was wooden would burn, or the fields or the trees would burn. And then they started bringing in the 500-pound bombs, and they bombed us for several months. And I think at the end of 1940, they gave us a couple of days' rest over Christmas, and then they bombed London and the docks for 3 solid days, night and day. And London was just devastated. There's 2 parts to London. There is the City of London, which is the original London, and which is the business district. And the other part of London is the higher class place and the big theatres and all that kind of thing, and Buckingham Palace. And And that weekend, for 24 hours at a time, they were bombing all around the clock for 3 days. They bombed London flat. My aunt went to work on the Monday morning and there was no office. Actually, there was nothing on the street. All the things were down. St. Paul's Cathedral sat right in the middle of that. St. Paul's Cathedral had about 4 small bombs on it, which were taken care of. And that gave us a great deal of faith because St. Paul's Cathedral had survived practically unhurt. And it stood there on its own in the which a lot was not moved for years. And it gave us courage. And then, of course, Winston Churchill became our Prime Minister. And Winston Churchill, although some of his speeches were a little on the funny side, Winston Churchill carried us through. Winston Churchill believed, and he wanted the people to believe. And so we all went to work all the time. We all did everything that was expected of us, and we took shelter at night when the raids were on. But in the daytime, we still rode the buses, we still rode the trains to get to work and do what we were supposed to do. The nights were bad. The nights were really bad because they came heavier then. One of the worst things in war is the noise. The noise of war is horrible. It's almost impossible to sleep. And you've got the anti-aircraft guns on the ground firing at the planes. You've got the planes in the sky. You've got the bombs falling. You've got things like Molotov cocktails coming down. You've got things like Junkers 88 that had a screamer built into them so that every time they dived, they screamed with the worst noise you could imagine. We slept for a long time at the beginning of the war in the cupboard under our stairs because that was the safest place to be in the kind of house that two-story house that we lived in. And so myself and my mother and father and my 2 brothers, we all crowded into that little box room underneath the stairs. You know, it's only the width of the stairs, and then of course it goes up. You can't stand in it because it's not high enough. But then the government had given people Anderson shelters, and I suppose you probably know what an Anderson shelter is. It's a curved metal, heavy metal, corrugated metal that is planted, has to be planted about 6 foot in the ground. But those didn't work very well. For some people it was all right, but England is a very wet country. So most people found that planting this thing 6 foot under the ground, covering the top with dirt, was not a very healthy way to go because the water would come up from out of the ground. So you'd have wooden duck boards in the bottom, but you still had a lot of moisture, and a lot of people quit using them. So Herbert Morrison, one of our parliamentary men, designed a big table that was made of solid steel, and it had like chicken wire, well, not chicken wire, but really heavy wire around all the edges. It had very heavy corners, and there's a sketch of one in the book somewhere. And that was supposed to save you from everything but a direct hit. You were supposed to put these wire things, hang these wires on hooks all around it. So you were in this little wire cage, you know, kind of like a bird or something, except it was so big. And all 5 of us slept in a line in there. And yes. Oh, and the cage was round it so that if it wasn't a direct hit, but shrapnel came in, or the windows blew in, or something like that, the wire was supposed to keep that out, so that it was to improve your safety to have that around. We slept in that for the rest of the war, really to the end of the war, when we could sleep. My mother wasn't a very good sleeper. My father was very ill. He had been gassed twice and wounded twice in the 1914-1918 war. And so he couldn't do a lot, but my mother would go outside and look around to see what was going on. She stood out there and watched the fires. You could see London on fire. And she was nervous about staying in the house. She came through everything all right, but she was a very worried woman. My father would go out if there was an incendiary bomb on our property and see about putting it out, but a lot of times the neighbors helped us because they knew he wasn't in good shape. We, for the first year, the theaters were all closed, the cinemas were closed, and a lot of shops didn't want to open. A lot of shops didn't have much to sell. Rationing started almost immediately that the war came, and we would get enough meat. Our meat ration was like a shilling's worth a week per person. We got about 2 ounces of butter, maybe, I don't know if that was a week or a month. Children would get a quart of milk. Some grown-ups didn't get any milk at all. It was really tragic because tea comes from other countries and the English drink tea all the time. And that was very short and it was rationed. Most everything was rationed. At one time even potatoes were rationed, bread was rationed, and the people would stand up outside the shop for 2 or 3 hours ahead of time waiting for the bread to come out of the oven. And with their coupons in their hand to trade in for loaves of bread. And then those little tiny coupons you had to be really careful with them because they had to be all counted to send away for more flour so you could make more bread for the next week. We ate a lot of things that we didn't know what they were. We ate a lot of things we didn't like. We got some of the original American powdered eggs, which turned a beautiful green every time you cooked them.
Those are tasty.
Yeah. No, they were more scary. You didn't know whether to taste them. But we managed. I don't know, Alaska or Iceland or somewhere decided that we should start eating whale meat. Well, if anybody says, would you like some whale meat, why don't you just say no, I'll try something else.
What does it taste like?
Well, I don't know, but it's almost impossible to chew. It's kind of like eating shoe leather or something. Yeah, it was not good. It was not good or popular. We had eggs that had been put into isinglass to preserve them. They were a little green too when they were cooked. But I think we only got 1 egg a month, and that half the time that wasn't worth eating. But we managed, and we kept a good feeling going. I mean, we didn't go to school for several months because all the air raid shelters weren't built. And when we did go to school, I used to go Tuesday and Thursday for 2 hours on each morning. And I rode the bus 5 miles to where my school was. I went to a high school in England, and all girls high school. And we would ride the bus to school. We'd go in, we'd turn in our work from the week before. We'd pick up our week for our work, new work to take home, and we did all our work at home. And I couldn't believe when I came to take my school leaving examination, which was the entrance examination to the University of London, that I passed, and that almost all of my class passed, even though we had taught ourselves at home. We used to take French and German, and we had a little bit of resentment for a while about taking German because, you know, you kind of said, oh, what are we going to do, lose the war? Are we supposed to be prepared? But no, it all went well. Clothes were rationed, severely rationed. Now, I started the school when I was 11. And by the time I left when I was 16, I was still wearing the same uniform that I had at 11. My mother had made it. She had put big pleats in it because, you know, when you're a girl, you kind of change a lot between 11 and 14 or 16. And so I just had to wear the same uniform all the time. We wanted coupons mostly for shoes because we grew out of shoes, and there were 3 of us, and we often needed new shoes. And of course, the shoes they were making were not very good at that time, not the usual English leather shoes. School was fine. We had a few projects. We kept pigs. The idea was that we would bring scraps from home or scraps from, bring scraps from home to feed the pigs. And when they were grown, they were sent away, and I think it went to feed the army, because I don't remember seeing any pork in the market. One day the Germans hit the pig pen where they lived, and the pigs got loose, and they ran around the area for about 3 days before anybody could catch them. So they weren't as fat as we were trying to get them, but it was hilarious.
Did they eat the whale meat?
Huh?
Would they eat the whale meat? The pig?
They may have. We also used to have what we call dustbins, garbage cans, fastened to our lampposts. Of course, there hadn't been a lamppost turned on for the whole war. But in these garbage cans, we were supposed to put any food that we didn't use, anything that was left over, scrape our plates into these cans, because they were taken to some other pigs somewhere else. There was, and they'd come around and empty it all the time. Our milkman came around with a horse and cart, and he had a big canister of milk on it because we ran out of bottles because they were using glass for something else, and so we used to go out with a jug to get our milk. He'd scoop it into our things because, well, that was the only way to get it. We used to have onions were very much rationed because England depends on Spain for onions. And when I was a little girl, before the war, you used to see Spanish men on bicycles riding around the town with strings of onions hanging on the handlebars. And that's where we would buy our onions, because England doesn't grow onions commercially, or they didn't at that time. You got to remember, this is 70 years ago. And times change. Times have changed so much, unbelievably. Anyway, finally, with nothing going on, you know, until France fell, we had more or less a quiet time, but we had to watch it because we didn't know when they were whether they might come across the channel. Then things started to loosen up. People felt that they could do more. The theatres started to open, and people started to do things. We went through the bombing, the Blitz. That was a very, very uncomfortable time. And then all of a sudden, we didn't see any planes for a while. You know, when the Blitz was on, you had all these barrage balloons in the sky. I think there's a picture in the book, but I haven't got any more marked. There were dozens of them. You know the great big blimps, like the Goodyear blimp. They're more or less like that. Sometimes if there was lightning, they'd catch fire and they had to be brought down. They were a little bit exciting at times because they'd bob around or they'd break loose. And
what did they tie them to?
pardon?
What did they tie them to?
They were wired to the ground.
Yeah. Did they, like a house or some kind of...
Oh, I think they had them. I think they were on a machine because they would go up and down on a wire.
Oh, okay.
But they also had wires hanging from them. The idea was that if a plane came close to it, it would cut off its wing or something like that.
So were they too big for a couple guys to go down and pull them out of the sky, or did they have winches, or how did they get them down?
Oh, I think they had winches. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they were pretty big.
Okay.
They were pretty big. But we had all those things around. We had a little time of quietness, and then we got the Vengeance bombers, the Vengeance rockets. I suppose you've learned about Hitler's Vengeance weapons, the V1s and the V2s. They came, the V1s used to come sputtering in, sounding like an old motorcycle that wasn't working right, you know, and they'd sputter across the sky, and you could see them. And then I think it was when the light went out, when the light went out on it, then it was going to come down. And you knew that if it was overhead, you were safe because it, you know, went down on a curve. But then the V2s. The V2s, I have read, I don't know how correct it is, that they could fly up to about 4,000 miles an hour. And they came in, and you never heard a sound until it hit the ground and exploded. There was no way to run from it.
That's a V1. Right here?
Yeah. Yeah.
It looked like kind of like a plane,
Yeah.
a little bit. The V2s were more like a rocket, but they were unmanned.
Yeah, they were
No pilot.
pilotless, yes. So people were being killed in seconds. You know, things were being destroyed because nobody knew they were coming. They didn't make a sound. Faster than the speed of sound, I guess they were. Anyway, they went on for a long time, and of course, coming from France was much easier for them than when they had originally wanted to send them from Belgium or Holland or something like that. Once they got themselves in France, well, then they could build them.
When did they stop?
Pardon?
What year did they stop? The V2s?
Not much before the end of the war.
Oh, really? They were still firing them back?
Yeah.
and stuff?
Well, no, yeah, they didn't send the first rocket until after Normandy.
Oh, okay. Oh, really?
I don't think so.
Ah. Huh.
So, and then of course we had the invasion. We kept knowing that something was going to happen, something was supposed to go on. And by then I was working for the government. With my mother being a widow, I had to have a government job so that I did not get called up, because women were called up as well as men. You had to have some real reason to stay out of it. And my mother, as a widow with small children, and so my father took me to London and took me out of school at 16 when I was studying math and science, because I was going to work for a science lab close to where I lived. He took me to London and got me a job with the government, and I didn't want to go. That was not what I had in mind at all. But anyway, I was there. I had to go there save my mother, and my father says to me, when I get better, you can go back to school. He was dead the next week. And so I never went back to school, which is, you know, if you have an opportunity to go to school and then you can't get it, it's a bit of a disappointment. And I always think about it, what would have happened. Maybe I would never have married an American if I'd worked at the science lab, who knows. Anyway,
What did the women do in the military?
pardon?
The women that got, that enlisted or were conscripts that went into the military, what was their role? What did they do in the military?
Well, there was shooting the ACAT guns.
Okay.
They worked on the guns. They moved airplanes. There were some of them that were in the Navy doing working things. They did a lot of things that men had done before.
Okay.
And they all had their special uniforms. I mean, they
So your
were.
parents wanted you to get this job instead of going into the military?
Yes, well, see, they didn't want me to do that.
Yeah.
But anyway, yes. Anyway, I worked for the government for quite some time. By then, I was 18, and the Americans had moved into a 16th century house that was near where I lived. It was very decrepit. It had been owned by famous people at different times. But the city that I lived in, or the town, a city in England has a cathedral. Otherwise, it's a town.
Okay.
Yeah. So we were only just a town, and they offered it to the American government for code breakers, except we didn't know that they were code breakers not until a few years ago. Anyway, my husband was stationed there. He had been there several months before I met him. They used to work around the clock decoding messages from Germany and finding out what the German plans were. And it is said that those men in that business helped to make the war end much earlier because of doing it. After the war was over, my husband was sent to Germany, and he code-breaked the Japanese messages from Germany. Anyway, I started to go to this dance hall, and I wasn't a very good dancer, but still. And some of the men from this American unit, this Signal Corps unit, said, "Joy, we want you to meet somebody one night." And so I went over and I met this man. Okay, nice to meet you. Talked for a few minutes, and I said, "Do you dance?" He says, "No." He says, "My folks are very religious. I don't drink, I don't dance, I don't smoke." And someone else came along and asked me to dance, so I went off and danced, and I think he must have gone home. Anyway, he must have liked me, because he came, every night he was off, he came and he stood right in the same place in the doorway and just watched me until one day he talked me into going for a walk. And we went for a walk, and there was a pub across the street with one of these claw things, where you put a coin in and you grab an animal. Well, that was as far as our walk went. We stood around that and talked. We went together for quite a while, and I met him the first week of September in 1944.
Mom and Dad like him?
Huh?
Did your mom like him?
Yeah. Oh, criminy, she liked him better than I did. We had so many rations, but I'll tell you, she could find stuff to make him apple pies and all kinds of things. Yeah,
He'd come over and the good stuff would come out. Huh?
and he would bring us stuff from the kitchen. They used to, if stuff didn't get used, they threw it away. Maybe they thought it was spoiled, or the guys didn't like it. So he would bring stuff to us, so that really helped our rations then. Yeah, he came over. He was a carpenter. He made several things, little pieces of furniture for my mother, because so much stuff had been broken. You know, our house did not get along very well. The roof was blown off more than once, and then they cover it with tarps, and then you freeze all the time because it's so cold. And then the windows would blow out, and when the window blew out, they put a linen with a wooden frame in it. They covered it with a linen, and that linen would, in the wind or the atmosphere from the bombs, would just flap, 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 and that added to the noise when you're trying to sleep.
So the roof and the windows were blown out from the bombs?
Yes, yes. The house, and it was a big crack all down the side, but they said they'd fix that after the war. I think it took a while.
Yeah, probably still there.
Yeah, after the war, we concentrated on rebuilding Germany, which was a thing that did not please a lot of English people, because a lot of English people had no home at all to go to. They were staying as much as 5 families in a house. It was, or they were staying in, you know, old schools and things like that. But we were rebuilding Germany right away.
What did you use for heat and power?
Coal.
Coal.
But we didn't have much coal. We had 4 fireplaces in our house, but we only ever used one.
Oh.
And my mother she had a metal teapot, and she kept it on the corner of the fire.
Wow.
And the fire, there was a water tank behind the fireplace that heated the water for a bath.
Okay.
But you could hardly have a bath because you just, you weren't supposed to have more than 4 inches of water, maybe 5 in
the
it.
bath.
Yeah, and you were supposed to keep your bath with water in it in case you needed it for an emergency.
Uh-huh.
I have seen, I have gone out after a raid, and I have seen water mains broken and gallons of water going down the street. I have seen gas mains blown up with the fire going way into the sky. It was not safe to go out after a raid. You just didn't know, you know, what they might be. And of course, girls were more protected. You know, they tried to keep the girls home, whereas the boys would go out and get into things. They wanted to find bullets, they wanted to find shells, they wanted to find all kinds of things, bits of airplane, yeah. So they went out more.
Did the fireplaces put out much heat? You had to freeze.
No, not really. It was terribly cold. We were really, really cold, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It was very uncomfortable. We didn't...
Did you have electrical power?
Most of the time, yes, yes.
Did you guys, when you said you had bath water 4 inches, did everybody bathe in the same water?
I've been trying to think about that, but that's one thing I can't remember.
Okay.
Yeah. But I do know that then you had to put some more water in the bathtub. Well, we used to heat it on the gas, heat the water in kettles on a gas range. But you know, by the time you took up the 3rd or 4th kettle, the first ones were already getting cold. It wasn't easy. It wasn't easy to buy clothes or shoes, and you had to line up for things. There was a farmer that used to sell rabbits once a week, at a place 5 miles away, and we'd ride the bus down there and stand in line for hours, hoping that still had enough rabbits when you got to the line so that you could get one, because that was unrationed meat. So that was something. We had rabbit stew as often as we could get a rabbit. That was pretty good.
Joy, could you tell them about volunteering to dig potatoes and the peanut butter?
Oh.
Those are my 2 favorites.
Well, that was one of the things Carl brought us. Was that was my where's his picture?
Behind you.
Oh, behind me. Anyway, he brought us some peanut butter. We had never heard of peanut butter, and it took quite a while for us to even attempt to try it. It was just an American thing, and oh, you'll like it, you'll like it. Well, you know, we didn't know. We'd had too many things we didn't like. So he brought peanut butter for my mother and some other things. Sometimes he'd get us a can of pineapple juice or something like that to add to things. We didn't drink in those days. Well, I have had a drink in those days because the legal age was 16. In those days, you could go into a pub anywhere. But mostly you could only buy beer because they saved the liquor for Americans who had more money. Americans had a lot more money than the English did.
Yeah.
I think that was part of their charm, you know, that...
They had stuff.
Uh-huh. They brought so much stuff over with them. And like, you know, they had extra scarves and things like that. This is, the back of this, the background of this is my husband's scarf from when he was in the army.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's a long, so, but, you know.
Did you like the peanut butter?
Pardon?
Did you like the peanut butter?
It's okay, but I haven't eaten it since. No, once, while I was still working for the government, in June it was, the government said, we want you to go help the Land Army girls. They have to dig the potatoes, and they haven't got enough girls to do it. So they sent a busload or a train load of us to down to the south of England towards Southampton. And we were supposed to stay in tents, camp in tents, and dig potatoes. Well, I think we dug potatoes the first day. But that evening, there was so much noise going on that we wanted to investigate it. And I've never known whether I feel sad or whether I feel happy about the picture that I saw. But that day was the 5th of June, 1944, and the streets were absolutely crammed with American soldiers with their duffel bags and their rifles and the caps on, marching towards the ports to go to the Normandy beaches. And they were laughing, they were singing, they were, you know, acting silly as they marched along. They weren't proper military marching, they were more or less letting them do their own thing. And you almost thought, do they know what they're going to? Do they know what's going to happen to them? They didn't. But they didn't know any better than we knew when we first saw a bomber flying over the top. War is so full of unexpected, dangerous, horrible things. It's just the worst thing. It's gone on forever, and with the way people disagree, when people can't get along with their next door neighbor, how are they going to get along with another country? I don't know. Maybe you are the group that are going to help change things. But I want to tell you that you have to keep going. You have to keep going. If you come across something when you're older and you think, I'm fed up with this isn't working, move on. Find something that will work for you. Be somebody. You can be somebody. All of you can be. You are the people that are going to be our teachers, our doctors, our president maybe. Who knows? But please, please, keep going. Move on. That was what we used to do the V for Victory sign. Before that, it was an impolite sign, but then when Churchill started doing it, well, then everybody did the V for Victory sign. Churchill was a good man. He worked hard for his country. It was disappointing that he lost the next election, but everybody was ready for something else to happen. Everybody hoped that the new government that would come in would make a difference. But of course there was too much damage done. There was too much repair to do, and there was too much learning of new stuff and too much worry about atom bombs and things like that for the government to be thinking too heavy on whether somebody's house got repaired after the war, because some of them did not get repaired for a long, long time. It wasn't, I don't think it was a shortage of materials, because materials came in and they'd be stacked along the side of the road, but and of course we had workmen coming home, but soldiers come home from the war and they are not the same man. You may have a wonderful brother, you may enjoy him when you're growing up, and when he gets to be 18 and the government calls him and says, I want you to go fight a war, when that man comes back, he is older, he is wiser, and he has seen things that you would never dream of. And any more of that is brought to the public. I mean, it was brought to us. We saw things that we never thought we would see. I mean, I knew a lady that was near a bomb, went to investigate. She wasn't killed, but she never walked a day again in her life. She would have spent her whole life, rest of the time that I was still in England, she was on a long stretcher and her husband pushed her around. You can't go investigating something if you don't really know what it is. Not unless you're a fireman or somebody that does that kind of work. And that's what we had. We trained all the men that were too old to go into the service went to became firemen or air raid wardens or something like that to help. And just like your country, everybody helped with munitions and things like that. I have to thank the American soldier for coming. I have to have thanked the Americans because it made all the difference to my life. We have to remember what they had to do, what they saw, and how many of them lost their lives. And their mothers and their wives at home were Gold Star mothers. They were also building bombers. They were flying bombers to England. The women were doing a whole bunch of work. They didn't just sit around and wait for their men to come home. They had to work too to keep the war going. It was a worldwide thing. A worldwide thing. There's a lot more I can say, but maybe I've given you some idea of some of the difficulties that we ran into, and maybe somebody wants to ask a question. Maybe somebody wants to say, you know.
Did you ever, during the war, did you ever believe that the Germans would win?
Yes, yes. When they came to the coast of France and pushed everybody off at Dunkirk, and the men came home, we were ready for them to come right behind right behind the men coming home. We were almost certain that they were going to come and be on our land. But they never came, and they never were on our land. And the other time was the Battle of the Bulge. Because the Battle of the Bulge, they took so long. Part of that was, I don't know if you teach it this way, but part of it was the disagreement between the English, the French, and the Americans about what town shall we take next. And there was a little confusion there. I know that Patton doesn't have always the best record, but at the time, we thought he was the best man on the job. Because if Patton could move on, Patton moved on. And when the Battle of the Bulge came, we thought we had lost the war. we thought after 6 years, almost 6 years, this is the end. And it was really scary for us. But it worked out all right. It worked.
Remember Patton was the one that went in and liberated the town of Bastogne?
Yeah. So if he hadn't have done what he did, then I don't think it would have turned out quite the same.
Yeah.
We may have still won because we were starting to surround Berlin, weren't we? The French, well, all the Europeans, the French and the Polish, and those were there. There was Americans, there was English and Australians. But what shall we say? The attitude of Montgomery and the lack of friendship between him and Eisenhower did not.
Oh.
No. And of course, we could hear things all the time, so we thought, you know, one of those idiots messing around now, let's get this thing done.
Yeah.
We've had it.
Are you, do you like the stance that Montgomery took, or are you more in line with Eisenhower's approach as a British citizen?
No, when I read about it, I always say, thank goodness Patton was there to move on. I thought it was sad that he died the way he did.
Yeah.
It's hard to know exactly how he died because the stories kind of vary.
Yeah.
And if you go to France, go to the Luxembourg cemetery. There are acres and acres of white crosses.
That's what I showed you guys.
And Patton's cross is, he wanted to be with his men, and his cross is at the head, and it's slightly bigger than his.
Yep.
And those cemeteries are not very far from the cemeteries of World War I. And I have a couple of distant relatives that are on the cemeteries, on the walls of, their names are on the walls because they died in World War I and they were never found. And that's a real tragedy because with the trench warfare they lost a lot of men. But that gets into another war.
Can you tell me what the Iron Cross is for?
The Iron Cross, what's the Iron Cross for?
That is what they hung their gunner things on. It's not really an Iron Cross. See, that first bar says rifle and this one says pistol.
Okay.
And as they got their exams, you know, got proficient,
Yeah.
they were given that to hang on to that
Okay.
cross thing. So, and there's,
Yeah, it's in this picture.
See it?
yeah.
Right there? Just the end of it right there.
Yeah. He was a T5, which is a Tech 5. That was his badge. He has, this is a World War II thing. He didn't win any Purple Heart or anything like that, but he was never wounded. He was a delightful man. He was very gentle. He was very kind. We have 4 children, and as I say, we're 50 years together. And I cringe sometimes when I read of how some of the Wilbrights came to this country and were not well received, or moved to a place, you know, had come from London and they lived way out in Missouri or somewhere in some little tiny village that was made their whole life totally different. I came to Salem and I have lived in Kaiser since I got here in 1948, and I have lived in the same house on Sunset Avenue for almost 60 years. I don't plan to move.
Not anytime soon? Not anytime soon? You're going to stay?
No, I'm going to stay.
Okay.
I'll be here. I'll come when I'm 103.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. How old was he when you, and how old were you when you guys got married?
I was 19, he was 24.
Okay.
And that's our wedding picture. I'll tell you about my wedding dress. That wedding dress has been examined by experts, and they believe it's 100 years old. My wedding dress came from the black market. I am sure it came from black market. My brother got it. He would never tell me. Clear until he died, he would never say where he got it. And I think just from the way he acted, that even though he was only a 17-year-old boy, he must have known his way around. Because I had
You knew how to talk to them.
I had an English wedding cake. Now, an English wedding cake is made of dried fruit, there's egg in the frosting, there's lots of sugar, there's lots of things that England hadn't seen for 6 years. If they didn't come from the black market, I don't know where they came from, but I had a beautiful wedding cake. We had 3 bridesmaids. This is my mother behind
Because
when...
the war was still going on when you got married.
Hun?
You got married in April.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, 10 days before it ended.
Yeah.
He had to go back to work. We had the weekend off. He had to go back to work for a week. And we left on the 8th of May to go to the South Coast for our honeymoon. And the 8th of May is VE Day.
All right.
And nobody was working.
That was in your
and
book. Yeah.
and there was big parties, big street parties going on and all that kind of thing.
Oh, how
And
fun.
a lot of the trains weren't running, and we stood on the train station waiting. We had to change to go to the South Coast from
Yeah.
London. And we stood there waiting and waiting. And you know, our big thought was, the war is over. What's going to happen now? Do I have to go to America?
Oh.
However, he was sent to Germany, and he stayed in Germany until 46, about the middle of 46. He came back to Salem, and I still didn't want to come to America. I still couldn't believe I could. We also, by then, had a little boy, and so there had been a lot of trouble bringing children across. A lot of children had died on the ships. People were getting on their ships with babies that were only days old to go to meet their husband. The government said, you know, it's time for you to go. You've got to go. And babies were dying. One of the worst things that happened to children during the war was at the beginning of the war, they wanted to evacuate a lot of children from London. And they decided to send them to Canada. The ship was hit with a U-boat.
U-boat, yeah.
Yeah, they never made it.
Your husband, how did he must have gone to university, or they don't just make anybody a code breaker. They must have known he was very smart. How did he get picked to do the job that he did?
I don't know. He was in Newfoundland before he went to England,
Okay.
because he was in the army for over 4 years. Well, he'd come to us at 44, so he'd been in since 42, and he had been working in Newfoundland where they had a big code breaker station, and apparently somebody realized that he knew what he was doing with that code, and they gave him the job.
What did he do when you guys lived in Kaiser?
Pardon?
What was his job when he came back to the States?
Well, he was a painter and decorator and refixed antiques,
Oh, okay.
restored antiques. Yeah, yeah, yeah. He did a lot of making, as I said, making little furniture things for my mom. Yeah. We didn't have a victory garden. I don't have a green thumb, and our back garden looked like a meadow or something like that. But, you know, with my father ill and my mother so concerned, you know, it just didn't work out. Am I doing this thing right? Is it coming through?
No, you're doing great.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
You guys have any questions?
Go ahead. Have you got a question? Oh.
Did you ever know anyone who thought what Hitler was doing was right?
Got
Did you ever know anyone that you thought? Did you ever know anyone that thought Hitler can't word it right?
Were there any pro-British, were there people in Great Britain that were pro-German that
Yes.
liked what Hitler was doing
Yes.
prior to the war.
Yes, yes. Oh, what was his name? There was a whole group of them. Actually, when I was really small, we lived in a house, and we had a couple of renters in the house. Of course, a great big old house, and one of them was with the brown shirts. The black shirts were Italian, weren't they? And the brown shirts were the Germans. And he was very pro-German, and he'd come home very, very late at night, and he'd hardly speak to anybody. But there were a lot of people. There were some in the government that were pro-German, that were a bit of a problem.
Because isn't that what?
Mosley,
It wasn't Hess.
prisoner of
Oh,
the Tower
really?
of London.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
yeah.
He was probably number 2 in command behind Hitler, and he, during the war, on his own accord, flies to Great Britain. And the thinking is that he was going to try and make a peace deal with Britain to get Britain out of the war, but he gets captured when he flies over to Britain, and they throw him into the Tower of London. They throw him in prison. And he lives out the rest of it. He went to Nuremberg. They tried him at Nuremberg, but they
Yes.
didn't execute him.
Yeah,
Because a lot of the bad stuff hadn't happened yet because he was so early in the war. So
yeah.
he just lived out the rest of his days in prison.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I knew a lot of people that didn't come back. I knew a lot of sailors that were lost at sea for quite some time. The boy that lived next door to us was lost at sea for something like 20 days, and when he came back, he was discharged because it just affected his mind. I mean, he just couldn't do it anymore, yeah. The girl across the street, her husband went away. He was on the hood, and the hood was sunk, and he never did see his little girl. He left before she was born, and he never did see her. So the whole street had all kinds of stories to tell. We had one little boy, I knew one little boy that was 4 years old, and he got so afraid of the noise and the bombs that he wouldn't get out from under the table. And finally he just died. They just kind of said that he just died from being so scared.
Oh, it's terrible.
Uh-huh. The first dead person I saw was a 3-month-old baby, and she was laying in her crib and died, and they said it was the pressure from the bomb on the street, the atmospheric pressure pressed her brain and
Killed her.
killed her.
Shocked her with that.
Yeah.
Wow.
So you just didn't know whether you were going to be lucky or not. I was lucky. And I married an American. I came here, and I guess it's the best thing I ever did. Although for the first couple of years I didn't think it was, because I was so homesick. But I've been back to England a lot of times. I've traveled a lot around the world. It's given me more opportunities than I would ever have had in England. I've been to a lot of European countries. I've been to Saudi Arabia. I've been to Russia. I've been to Thailand. I've been to Japan, and I've been to South Africa. And most of it is knowing someone that was there, that I go and visit. My book has really done unbelievable things. I get, it's on Amazon, and I get royalties from Australia, from the United Kingdom, from the European Union, and from America. And who would have thought that somebody writing a book, and when I was writing it, I would think, Grandma Moses started painting when she was 80, so you can do it.
Yeah, there you go.
And look what's happened.
That's
I mean,
great.
well, I don't know if I've satisfied you what you wanted to hear. Or.
You guys got any other questions?
What was Kaiser like when you first ended up here?
Well, it was hard to find. It wasn't very big. It was just Kaiser corners. Actually, in the back of my book, I wrote a little bit about what Kaiser was like. Also, at this time, Kaiser is making a video thing for long-time Kaiser residents, and so they have approached me, and I wrote some of the stuff that I remembered about Kaiser. And next week they are going to videotape me for this program they want for what Kaiser was like a long time ago.
Were the roads paved?
I think the main road was.
River Road?
Yes, there used to be a bus that would run once in a while. It was so funny, the getting on the bus, because there was this lady on the, always seemed to be the same lady on the bus, and she'd say, "Oh, darling, are you going to Salem again today?" Darling, you know, that was not a word that you shook around loosely in those days. And I thought, my goodness, you know, the people here really do talk like they do on the movies.
Where did the kids that would, you know, that were around at that time in Kaiser, where did they go to school?
My son went to Kaiser when it was still on the corner here.
Yeah?
And my daughters went to Cummings, because they were a bit younger than he was.
And then where'd they go to high school?
Here.
Oh, they went here?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Like I say, my daughter Jennifer Vickers is helping put together the reunion for the first year.
Well, in the 40s when you moved here, in the 50s.
Oh, they went to, my son went to Salem High.
Salem High.
North.
Okay.
It was called Salem High then.
Right, okay.
North.
So the Kaiser kids went to Salem High School too?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And what is now Macy's, that used to be Myron Frank's, was the courthouse for a while.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that were different.
Yeah.
You go out 12th Street and you can't possibly recognize it. It's because what with the railway station there and they took out all kinds of roads there.
Yeah.
There used to be a
Big cannery across the street.
yeah, and there was a wood yard, a lumber yard.
Huh.
Yeah.
So Kaiser was mostly an agricultural community then, mostly farms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Did it flood?
Mm?
Did it flood often?
Oh yeah, it flooded the first year I was here. The first year I was here, Vanport flooded too.
Oh.
And that news got to England, and they wondered what kind of a country I'd gone to.
Under a swamp.
What's your favorite part of here? Like being here?
Pardon?
Like where you are now, Kaiser and Salem? What's your favorite part?
Favorite part of America, of being in Oregon, being in America,
Oh,
what's your favorite part?
I think Oregon's a great place to live. I do like the East Coast, like the Carolinas and that, because they live at a slower pace than we do here. But I don't think I would want to live there. Actually, I don't want to move from my house. But sometimes if I think if I could take my house and put it beside a river, I would be happier, but it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
What's your least favorite part?
Huh?
Your least favorite part?
Living here, what don't you like about it?
Of Kaiser?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know what I would call my least favorite part. I'm not very fond of the, not the mall, what do they call it? Kaiser Station. Well, you know, after I'd been here a few years, they built Lancaster Mall. Well, you parked your car and then you walked around and everything. Now, if you go to Kaiser Station, you've got to park your car in front of every store you go to. Otherwise, you've got to carry what you've bought clear across the parking lot, see? And that's not good when you've got to carry all that stuff.
Poor design.
Huh?
Poorly designed.
Yeah, it is a bit strange. It's not even, if you're looking for something, you can't even go from one shop to the other. You've got to go across the other side and everything.
It's true.
No, it's nice. They've done a lot of nice things. I can't say that I feel that they always spend their money in the right place. I might get kicked out if I say this. I'm not thrilled with the art that they put up and down the street, like that pearl ring, diamond ring thing, and that funny looking.
And little like statue beads.
Yeah. So I think that If we have money to do that sort of thing, we should do more for the people rather than for the decoration. Art is all right, but it's not, doesn't take the place of looking after people. And we do have quite a few people that should be looked after. You meet them when you go to schools, you know, you can tell that sometimes when you're with the younger grades, you realize that they're not paying attention because they're not used to school and that kind of thing. And we need to work with making people used to school and making people realize that they're there to learn, is what I feel. And we've got to do more for the people. Now, Landon and I are going around and speaking to veterans from World War II.
Oh, okay.
We've been to Emerald Point, we've been to, we've been to about 6 or 8. And we have been getting their stories, and, you know, Terry records some, Landon writes them down, because we don't feel that this generation, my generation, should be forgotten, because what would have happened to America if England had been taken over? Have you ever thought of that? The journeys were getting shorter and shorter. They could get across in the sea much faster. They could cross the ocean in a short time. And look how far the Japanese went to bomb Pearl Harbor. It's unthinkable what could have happened.
Yeah.
But then you don't worry about what could have happened, I guess. When I crossed the Atlantic, it was not the best thing that I was ever on, although I can't say I suffered, and my little boy loved running around on the ship, but we hit very bad storms. We were we left in February, and the journey was supposed to take 10 days, and it took 14. And the storm was so bad and the ship was so empty, and it was an old troop ship, and it rode on 2 high waves, is what they told us, and it split down the side. So we were taking water. The furniture was flying around. You sat down to eat, and you didn't know if it was your dinner or the next person's. And I go, this is just everything's going back and forth, and a lot of people were hurt. And so we tried to make it fast into New York Harbor, but New York Harbor, you have to have a pilot bring you in. You can't bring your own ship in. So the pilot went home at 4 o'clock, and we probably got there about 4:30. So we had to sit out there all night wondering how much water we were going to take in and what might happen. The next morning we got up and we sailed past the Statue of Liberty, and there were more people on that ship than I had seen the whole trip. There must have, the people in the hold must have never come up until somebody said, here's the Statue of Liberty. So I just didn't know where all those people came from, because the ship seemed very empty, and they told us that it didn't have a very big group on it, but it sure did when we got to the Statue of Liberty. Everybody wanted to see it.
While your food was being rationed, what was the one thing you missed the most? While your food was being rationed, what did you miss the most?
I don't know. We didn't have any fruit. I mean, we grew apples, but other than that, you know, things like oranges and bananas and strawberries and all that kind of stuff all used to come from the Spanish countries and the warmer countries. And also, they didn't make any luxury things. You know, in England, when you bought a peach, when I was little, they were always separately wrapped in a divided box so that they wouldn't get beaten up. And when I first came here and I saw peaches coming off the tree and all thrown into a big box, it just didn't make sense to me because they used to take such good care of them. But you see, there wasn't time for people to do that kind of thing. And stuff that came from the Channel Islands, the Channel Islands were invaded by the Germans. The Germans took over the Channel Islands for the whole war. So that wasn't easy because we used to get a lot of fruit and flowers from the Channel Islands.
I got a question for you. It's not really necessarily a war question, but you've obviously seen a lot, and you know you've lived a very you know a life that's completely full. What invention do you think that man has created during your lifetime has had the most profound impact on you? Do you think it's made your life the easiest, or do you think that's pretty cool?
Well, how about the airplane?
Airplane?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I fly to all these countries.
Yeah.
I've tried going on the ocean. I've been across the Atlantic twice, and I think we'll forget that.
Yeah. You like flying better, huh? Okay. Airplane.
Yeah, and I've never been afraid to fly, never at all. It's always been comfortable. Of course, I'm not, well, I'm not skinny, but I'm not a big person. So, I mean, the big complaint now is the seats aren't big enough, but I'm not. I've never had a problem. Mm-hmm. I have gone somewhere, well, as long as my mother was still alive. I didn't go for 20 years. 20 years after I'd come here, I went home on exactly the same date that I arrived here. Just don't know why, just for memory's sake or something. And I spent 3 weeks in London with my mother, and that's when I went back to London and I could walk right to my office and all that kind of thing. Anyway, I found it was so easy to fly because I flew over the pole on Pan Am. It was so easy to fly that I had 2 daughters. One was just graduated from McNairy, and one was going to graduate in 2 years. And I said, "You want to go to England?" I bought tickets, and I took them the next year. They have traveled ever since. One of them's lived in Turkey, one of them's lived in Saudi Arabia and Germany, and they are as adventurous as I am.
All right.
Yeah.
That's good.
So if you can see the world, if you ever get a chance to go somewhere, go. I mean, you can go as a student with a backpack, or you can go first class if you can find the money, or get the save frequent flyer. That's what I've done. I've done a lot of trips on frequent flyer.
Good advice.
Yeah, save all you can. Do something wonderful with your life.
Your favorite place that you've been to?
Favorite place?
Oh, favorite place? Well, for interest, I liked going to Saudi Arabia, but my daughter lived there for 13 years. But it was strange. The first time I went, it was Saudi Arabia. It was strictly Arab. You watched the people, the men running to their, to their prayer 5 times a day and things like that. But the second time I went, you watched them walk into McDonald's or
Chicken nuggets.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I thought, America's really gone too far,
Yeah.
in my opinion. I mean, it may be great for your generation that you are doing all this stuff all over the world. It really is, but it is taking away the individualism of those countries. I mean, even in Paris, we had to stop at Pizza Hut because I took my granddaughter with me.
That's not good. Pizza Hut?
Right in the main part of Paris. So the world is not what it was.
Yeah.
And it's like one of the hotels that we see a lot. It starts with an M, but I can't remember. I'm sorry for my brain, it's not always working. But anyway, every country you go to, it's built on the same architectural plan as it is downtown or in Portland. And I think, well, and I went to Thailand, and I stayed in Bangkok in a hotel. And there was some people there that were a little older than I am. they would not leave the hotel because they could get American food in the hotel. They didn't want to try anything else. And they didn't even go out and look at all those beautiful, beautiful buildings that there are in Bangkok. I mean, it's a treasure to go to Bangkok.
They're not gonna venture out.
Well, that's what I ask. I mean, I've got to get into things, probably too much
Get into
sometimes.
trouble a little bit.
Yeah.
There you go.
People said, when I went to Italy, I went to Rome with my daughter, and people said, you'll have a terrible time in Italy. They'll be bothering you. There'll be things happening. So we went to dinner somewhere, and the group of people at the next table said, well, we're going over so-and-so for a drink. You want to come with us? My daughter and I. So here we are walking around the streets at 2 o'clock in the morning, and then we decided to go back to our hotel, and these people weren't ready to leave. So we walked back about 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning, and we didn't even get bothered. We were disappointed. Don't promise me something if I'm not going to get it. Anyway, it's a wonderful life. Try to travel. Try to do all you can in this world, because you'll only be here once. And it's fun. It's fun. Life is fun. You get bad things. I can't say that bad things haven't happened to me, but if I dwelt on those, then I wouldn't remember the good things, would I? Try that.
Anybody got anything else? All right, well, let's give Mr. B a